So yeah, because she was headed towards home. So I guess I'll.
I guess.
Well, we don't even have a quorum at this point.
No.
I can.
Well, we aren't going to do any. We aren't going to do any voting anyway, so it doesn't matter.
That's true. It's a working session. So hey, I call this meeting to order. 2 minutes late. That's right.
All
Meeting
right.
called to order. And slightly odd, I guess. I can. I assume they should be getting on. We set the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, we know they got the stuff because we had questions from Nola and
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah, and this is the right link because everyone's on the thing. All right. Well, we're just we're slightly behind, I guess, but
oh, not us. Not us. We're never behind.
it's different. I mean, I think the time is good to have the time earlier in the day like this rather than later. I think it makes a lot of sense. But
I just wasn't sure if can they get it. Well, two of them are retired, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But
no, yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
yeah,
Only
and
one
other
I
ones are kind of
a little
flexible.
bit was Lee, maybe. That Lee might.
yeah, that's the only I was kind of thinking.
Yeah, and I mean his schedule's a little it's tight, but it's a little flexible.
Did you try and text the Knights, see if they were around even?
Nola just left here, so she should be good. Lee, I just texted. He said he's getting on. I can message the Knights.
Okay.
Oh, I have a phone call coming in from Lee. Maybe he's having trouble getting on. Yeah, if you go to public notices and then it's the budget working session. All right. Yeah, there's a few other notes. All right, no problem.
Well,
No yawning.
why not?
Because then we all will.
All right, we did get another one.
Here's Lee.
And there's Nola.
All right.
We're slowly rolling in.
There, made it. Oh, poop.
We were getting worried about you.
Talking with Marie. Jeff knows who Marie is.
Yep. All right. I messaged the Knights. So hopefully they're coming.
Yeah, I was trying to launch in on my iPad, and I couldn't get my iPad to cooperate.
Okay, yeah.
So I gotta hook my phone up to my charger because my phone is about dead. I wanted to use my iPad really bad. Bigger screen.
All right. And the Knights are getting a computer out to get on.
Good.
Slow opening.
Again, my phone. There we go. I came home to my lovely neighbor doing my driveway.
Ooh,
Very happy.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew my snow blower wasn't going to cut through that thick, wet stuff, you know. And he's got a real nice big riding snow blower.
And there we have Carrie.
Come on, bring this upstairs.
And I clicked admit. It seems like it's having a long time loading Carrie in for some reason.
Here we go. Okay. Mhm.
There we go.
Carrie's
Nice.
trying to get in.
Yeah, I clicked admit.
Love technology when it works, right?
When it works.
Keeps wanting me to launch my own meeting. I don't understand what it's doing.
That's what my iPad did to me. And I couldn't get on through my iPad.
I'm on my
So
I'm on my laptop.
Hey, there he is.
Hi,
Hi there.
I'm still trying to get in here. But I don't understand what it's doing.
I'm still stuck in outer space. I'm not sure how to come back to Earth.
I love it.
I'm really not sure if I want to come back.
All right.
Sorry to hold you guys up. We were thinking 6 o'clock. We're like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, we in that last one we had discussed it, and I mean the earlier one I think still makes sense for the budget meeting because a lot of times it's longer and it's going over,
Details.
tedium of numbers.
How are you doing over there?
Waiting.
Well, he can still hear you and he's present. So if you want to get started, and then I'll leave the room once he's.
And we can hear him. So I called the meeting to order. Oh, there it is. And but we have not done the Pledge of Allegiance yet. So now Pledge of Allegiance.
Perfect. Ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and next. We don't have any public comment, I believe, because there is no public in the meeting. So moving on to the next section, we have board discussion of the budget. And obviously this is quite a detailed big thing, but we all have the packets and I sent them out twice, but Lori was able to switch these out with the latest ones. So everyone has the newest ones in the paper format. And on this, basically, those numbers at the far left are the GL numbers, and they start furthest of the left of the number, starts with the biggest unit as far as the department is concerned. And then each of the numbers designates a smaller unit until you get to the end, which in this case, and we use all zeros for the last 3 zeros because we don't get that detailed on here. At that point, we'd probably have to hire some more bookkeepers to keep track. Luckily, we did kind of get lucky with this, in that it's the supervisor's duty, statutory duty, to oversee this part of the budget, the planning section. But Lori has been doing it, and which works out great for us because she she has been able to do a lot of work on this, and I would have struggled with it quite a bit. So obviously we're all on a strong learning curve here. But I think if we just start at the top and start heading down the list, that'll probably work best. And Lori, is there any chance you could kind of start
Sure.
walking us down the paperwork?
Okay, so the first section is the general funds budget for money coming in. Okay, so if you look at that, the left column is what was approved this year for the budget. The center column is the activity so far, and then the far right column is what we're projecting for next year. So if you look, like the first one is property tax, we're projecting $233,220. That's based on a 1.4% increase that is projected for next year from the assessor's office. The penalties on taxes, we're projecting we'll get $1,500 in penalties for people that pay late. The admin fees, that's the fees that we collect for collecting the taxes for everybody else. And we're projecting $90,000 for that for the township. For business licenses, we're projecting $21,000. And that includes the $20,000 we're projecting to get for the 4 marijuana permits next year. Dog licenses, we're projecting at $450. The local community stabilization number, 13,500. That's pretty standard. It's a little low this year. I still haven't gotten the last payment yet, so that's why it's not showing up in the budget. The state shared revenue, that's what we get from the state of Michigan, based on the information that I file with them every year. And they're projecting an increase this year. Our share should be $753,516. Now, last year when COVID hit, we took a hit on our revenue share, but they're projecting that we won't this year. So that's why we went with that number. We are not at this point getting any grants this year. We haven't filed for any. You see, we got a $9,200 grant last year. That was for COVID. And that was something that we went after. Zoning and variance fees I kept the number the same as last year. We are doing a lot of people are building. We got a lot of people doing changes, but I didn't want to go too crazy with that number in case it starts to slow down a bit. So I just made that 4,000. The building department rent and supplies and using township employees, that's a fixed rate. We charge that to them every year unless we decide that they're using more of our resources, and then we kick that up. And a couple years ago, we did raise that rate. So I didn't project an increase this year. Transfer station tipping fees, I moved them up a little bit from last year. I'm thinking I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to overestimate. I think 65,000 is pretty fair, looking at we're at 71 right now. I'm thinking once people can get out again, they're going to start purging. I know I am. So that's my thought there. Charges for services, we don't budget anything, because that's like if somebody gives me a FOIA request or something like that. So I don't anticipate that, but I have to have that line item on the budget. The school summer tax collection, again, that increase is based on 1.4%. So it's 16,848. Winter taxes are always bigger than summer. So I'm not sure if you all knew that, but okay. I'm not anticipating any sale of assets. The $6,500 that's on there for this year we had that 2009 Chevy Colorado, the township did, that we sold. That's that. Court fines, I'm not anticipating any court fines, so we got $0 there. Bank interest, I budgeted 13,000. We budgeted 20,000 this year, but when COVID hit, everything took a tank. So we're starting to see things pick up again. So I tried to be a little bit, I'm kind of conservative. So I just said 13,000 for that. The rent on Duff House stays the same unless we change that, and we haven't talked about that. Franchise fees collected, it's 89 a year. We're still waiting for payments. I usually get the last payment for our franchise fees after March, and I just back them back in. Election reimbursement, I think we're going to be on our own for the elections this year, so I didn't budget any election reimbursement from the state. Copies, fax reimbursement, that's just a general catch-all for any other revenue that comes in. I budgeted 10,000 because we're at 91 right now. So, and our cell tower revenue stays the same, 16,346. So that gives us a total budget for next year of $1,336,669. So that's what we're anticipating the general fund to get next year.
And just one comment on here from me. So it's like the property tax looks weird because it's $230,000 budgeted, 233,000 for next year, and the activity is 15,000. So it's a huge gap, and that's because property tax is currently happening, just happened.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why the number looks so
Yeah,
weird.
and I haven't done the journal entries for the taxes that are happening right now yet. So that's why there's a big
It's being
gap.
processed. Yeah.
And this is, if you were to see the numbers that we get for property taxes, what the township actually gets for property taxes is small. Because everything else is going out to the schools, to the senior citizens, to the colleges. So yeah, so that's why those numbers aren't big, because we do get a lot of money in, but we don't get a lot.
Okay, I got one question too, real quick.
Mhm.
So just the center section is just what's current, like.
Yes, that's the activity. That's what my
came in
general,
or whatever.
yep, that's the center section is the activity so far.
Okay,
I think I ran this last Thursday. So that's the activity so far.
okay.
And there'll still be more activity, of course, before the end of the year.
Mhm.
And that's the March or whatever when it
March 31st.
is the end of
And
the.
there's a trickle effect. There's a few things that come in after March 31st, but I just back them back into
Yeah.
this year. So, okay.
All righty.
Okay, so the next section is what we're going to take out of that money that we're getting from the general fund. So the first section is legislative. I'm projecting $100,000 for professional and audit services. As you'll see, we've only spent 46 so far this year, but I anticipate we're going to have to spend more for the auditors next year because we're all new except for me. So the auditors are going to have to do more work to close out the books this year. And I didn't drop anything. I'm still thinking we still need to use our attorneys now and again. So I just kind of left that money alone. Printing and publishing, it was down. We usually spend about 10,000 a year. It was down last year because we didn't do a whole lot because we were closed for a few months. But now with things changing, every time we make a change, we have to publish it. So that's why I left the publication at 10,000. And then fees and memberships, that's our MTA memberships. If we have the township is involved in anything else, those dollars come from there. And we're at 52 right now. So 55 I thought was a good number. So legislatively, we're going to spend $115,500. And then the next section is just for the supervisor. Now no pay raises, so the salary and the pension is going to stay the same. But since Jeff and I talked, there's a lot of things he wants to do this year as far as education. So we pushed his education budget up to $1,500 this year.
Yep.
So, and this is things that he and I've already talked about, and he will spend that. So
Yeah, well, I just comment on that. So the supervisor position, so a little form from MTA, what my duties are and my state mandated duties are: meeting management, ordinances, lawful expenditures, budgets, township administration, overseeing assessing and risk management. And so especially for zoning and assessing, I can do a decent amount of training. It takes a decent amount of training to be oriented. And if I spread that out over time and I'm doing a bunch of training in my third year, it makes no sense. So I might as well take it now and get oriented in that way. And we'll see if I do all the training that I expect, I'll spend the $1,500. I don't know if I'll be able to do it all or not, but I'm in one program through Michigan State University right now for zoning training for the next 3 months. And then one thing we didn't include in here, which would be a big thing, but when we get to the clerk and the treasurer, we'll see that they have a deputy clerk and a deputy treasurer. Right now, I don't think would be a good time to add in a deputy supervisor because I'm not oriented enough and we can't see exactly what gaps. I haven't had long enough to notice the patterns of what gaps are missing exactly in the overseeing of ordinances and assessing and the budget and the other things that are included in those statutory duties. But I think it's a definite possibility that somewhere maybe 6 months down the road from now that it would be worthwhile of adding a deputy supervisor and having one more person to pick up some of those duties. It'd be a big budget expense, of course, but I think it's worth considering.
And because Jeff and I talked about it, I do have another budget with a deputy supervisor at 6 months. Because along with just the pay also come benefits. So I've got the budget with a deputy supervisor salary, their pension, and all the medical dental benefits too. So if that's something that we want to talk about, we can do that. But yeah, Jeff and I talked, and yeah, now isn't the time, but we're going to take 6 months and look at the future and see, where the gaps are, and if the gaps are just temporary gaps, or if the gaps are something we need to actually have a person to fill that position for. So that's what he and I talked about, and that's what we are looking at for the future. For the trustees, of course, like we said, the salaries are the same, the pension's the same. We left the budget for education at 1,000. Jeff said that some of the trustees had asked about having a library with books and whatever you need as far as education. So that's something, we don't have a problem with that. We just don't know what you're thinking. So we need to talk to that about that in the future to get a library started. So there are books here for the trustees. So what you need, get what you need. Okay.
Yeah, and I think $1,000 in that fund is solid, and it's not traditionally used to that extent. I think so. It works out perfect. Remaining as what it was, we'll just probably use it.
Yeah. So, and for the elections, I've got 15,000 budgeted in salaries for elections next year because I do have 3 elections. I know that already. And I'm keeping my operating supplies a little bit high because I'm anticipating we're gonna have a lot of absentee, which is more cost, because that's postage and more paperwork going out. I kept my repair and maintenance in 10,000 this year because I've got mandatory equipment that all my election equipment has to go through mandatory checking this year, which is going to cost about $5,000. And I also want to look at potentially, if the money is still in the budget, purchasing another scanner for my absentee counting board because I used 2 in November. I borrowed 1 from the county and it was perfect. If we hadn't had it, our people would have been here for 18, 20 hours because there were a lot of absentee ballots. So that's just something to kind of throw out there in the future that I'm looking at. So the elections budget is at 35,000 right now. Assessing the 94,000, that's contracted, so that doesn't change. That's what we contracted with Muskegon County for our assessor. Plat maps, I kicked that up just a couple $100 because it seems every year our cost to use the GIS maps through the county goes up. So I just budgeted a little bit more this year so I don't have to do a budget adjustment. So assessing is at $99,800. As far as the clerk section, my salary's the same, of course, and my deputy clerk's $1,000 stayed the same. I budgeted for a 25-cent raise for the deputies this year. So the dollars amounts you're seeing are with a 25-cent raise this year, and the pension goes up accordingly. I left my postage and operating supplies the same, and I left my education the same this year because last year I had $1,000 budgeted, but everything was canceled. It looks like I've got a couple of conferences I go to for clerk that they're actually going to happen. Some of them, the one at the end of the year looks like it might be in person, but there's a virtual one coming up in the spring. So I left the $1,000 budget there.
And on these, the raises for the administrative assistant, which is the deputy clerk and the deputy treasurer, and there's one under maintenance, Lori, Gerald, and I had talked those out to see what would kind of make sense and balance out. And this is what we came up with.
As far as the treasurer, of course, his salary stays the same, and there are the changes for the deputy treasurer and the pension numbers. The operating supplies stayed at $5,500. The reason why that's so high is that's the cost to mail out taxes. So that's why his operating and postage is so high. And then I left the education at $1,000 there for Gerald this year. So we get down to building and grounds. We've got full-time maintenance pay. The first line is just for Ken, who is basically our only full-time maintenance right now. And I budgeted his pay. We talked about it, his pay up to $17.50 an hour because he does everything. And then the next line is part-time maintenance, and that line item, you'll see it's a huge jump, but I projected, of course, it's a transfer station person and then 4 part-time maintenance people at the high end of the scale, which is $17 an hour for 1,400 hours.
And so when we talked about this, we're remaining a little bit fluid on it because it depends on how many hours different people are going to take when they do it. So we might have more people that are taking less hours overall, or we might have some people that are working like seasonal full-time through the summer. And then right now we're really stretching our maintenance and our fire chief thin with doing a lot of plowing covering, and it's, we're getting through this year, but essentially it's like a Band-Aid. It's not a good system that would work moving forward in the future. So we need to have more budgeted for plowing hours next year. So someone part-time through the winter as well. So ideally we won't hire everyone at the top pay of $17. Some people will be $15 to $17 range, depending on their experience. When I hire them in, and then depends on hours as well, can obviously fluctuate. And then some of that will go for a part-time person over the winter to cover some plowing as well.
Okay, so the pension is based on Ken because he is full-time. Operating supplies, we left at $3,000. Fuel we left at $5,500 because once spring hits and things are starting to loosen up, our people can actually go out and do their work again this year. It's lower this year because there were like 2.5 months they didn't work. Repairs and maintenance, we left at $3,000. Utilities, we left at $3,000. I've got repairs and maintenance for equipment, we left at $3,000. That's small equipment. And then repairs and maintenance on all the equipment at $4,000. And then capital outlay, that's the big ticket items. We put $20,000 in there because Ken has talked to us there. We're looking at potentially we may have to replace a tractor. There are just a few things that we've got coming up that we're going to have to do something. So we put the $20,000 in there in case we need to do it this year.
Well, and furnaces will be a big thing. Because
Yep.
at one point we had 3 broken furnaces, which is all of the furnaces in the maintenance building. Now, luckily, Ken was able to switch out the thermostat on one, which fixed it to the rooms, and he was able to kind of work out the other 2 and get them up and going. But we did have, luckily, Chief Stiles was able to contact Northside and get a fairly quick estimate of what something like that would look like, so we at least know a little bit going into the budget. And they came back with a little over $6,000 for just the 2 main furnaces that would do the main part of the room, and they are 30 plus years old. So that'll probably end up being this year.
Yep.
Okay, so it's for administration, and that's for the cost for running the office. We've got $6,500 for office supplies and postage. Computer support and operating expense is 22,000. That's the cost that we pay to Central Dispatch for them to do all of our IT work. Anything, if we need computers, we shouldn't, but you never know. So that's that expense there. Repairs and maintenance are at 1,900. Professional services, that's if we have to have someone come in outside. The payroll fees, that's pretty standard. We have to pay every month for direct deposit for our payroll. So utilities are at 10. I left them at 10. They're probably still a little high, but I thought better to be safe than sorry. Repair and maintenance at Duff Roadhouse, I left that at 3,000. We went over that this year because of the well going out. We had to replace the well. But I think that we're going to probably start seeing a little bit more start to happen with that house because we haven't had to do anything for a long time. So I kept that up at 3,000. Miscellaneous and education, that's if there's someone needs education in the office that we didn't think about. Here's where we would take that line item from. The property chargeback at $5,000, that's what we have to pay as a township for the properties that are in the township's name. Last year they were so high because we paid off all the drains, and so now we don't have to worry about paying on any of the drains this year. Capital outlay, we're at 15. We were at 50. We didn't spend any of that money this year, but we dropped it back down to 15 because we don't know. And I'd rather have a little bit in there and be safe than not have anything and be sorry. So that's where we are at with that. The public safety, that $38.95 is what we have to pay. Reese Puffer reimburses us for it. That's for the crossing guard in Twin Lake. The $2,500 for the weed spraying. Years ago, the township passed a resolution to pay $500 into all of the lake funds every year, including Fox Lake in the Village of Lakewood Club. So that's money that I just transfer over to the lake funds every year. For fire expenditures, we budgeted for $55,000 for the chief this year. That's a slight increase on his pay. The 18,076 is the 3.5% increase that we're seeing on all of the benefits that are coming through this year. And then his pension is based on the increase in pay. Let me switch pages real quick.
Zoning and ordinance next, so I can talk to zoning and ordinance because the numbers look kind of odd. So on this, as Lorraine slowly pulls her hours down, pulls her hours back, and we have someone else coming into that role, I'm going to try to organize a decent amount of overlap of time because it's a big position. It's an important position. It's a lot to manage. And for the new person coming in, to keep that salary about the same, but to decently increase the hours up to a full-time position, and which they'll need as they're learning quite a bit. And so that the overlap in personnel is the jump you're seeing in pay there. And we, Lori, Gerald and I calculated it out to what we think it'll be. And I think that's pretty accurate. And then the ordinance enforcement left the same. And then miscellaneous and education, we boosted up, not that much, but we boosted it up to 1,000. And that should be able to get the new person through the citizen planner program through MSU, the master citizen planner program through MSU, and the zoning administrator certificate through MSU, all within that $1,000, I do believe. So I think that seems pretty solid.
Okay, so, and then the planning commission is next. We left those numbers, I left those numbers at 5,500 for salary because we have so many new people, they've been having more than one meeting a month. And I think that's probably going to keep happening. So I budgeted for that. $500 for operating supplies, $300 for documented mileage. That's if they have to go to in-person training, there's mileage there for that. And then we increased the education from 500 to 1,000 because there are so many new people. They're going to need to get training. They're going to need to get education. The zoning board of appeals, I left the salary the same. I think there's a lot of changes going on, so that means we're going to have a lot more zoning ZBA meetings. So I left that number high, and then I increased the education to $500 too, because there are some new people on the ZBA and they will need education. The board of review, I left those numbers the same. It looks low for what we already have, but we've got March board of review coming up, and that's 3 full days. So that's going to kick that salary up. So the 1,275 looks good. And then we've got $100 in education. It was just mandated that the board of review has to go to training every 2 years now. Didn't used to have to do that, but now they do. So we're going to put money in the budget so we've got money so they can go for training.
And we got that done this year. And luckily the county run a program
Thank
online for
goodness.
free that we just recently went through. Lori and I went to it as well. So we have that one done for this year, but yeah, it'll be a thing in the future.
Yeah, so that was nice. For the roads and ditches, we've got 28,000 for brining. It's an estimate. I haven't even heard anything from the road commission as far as brining for this year, but we always do a little high just in case they have to brine twice. We've got $100,000 in drainage, ditch cleaning and maintenance. I put $100,000 back in there this year because we did the channels last year, and you'll see that that's the 84,000 there. We don't know if we're going to have to go back and do them again this year. We are not sure what kind of sediment is going to drop. So I thought it would be better just to put the money there just in case we need it. We got some numbers from the road commission. I think you all got them for what we've got in second year. And the gravel is about 111,000. So I budgeted 120,000 just to be sure. And then for road improvements, wedge and seal coat, those numbers come to, I want to say about 120 something, but I always put a little extra in just in case, because you never know, things change. They might have to go farther on one road or something. So just to have a little bit of cushion there. So we're going from 528 budgeted last year down to 384,923 this year. Public works, I left the transfer station costs alone, and I left the 15,000 for junk cleanup because that's our cost if we have to go out and clean up when people throw stuff in the ditches on the township property. So we need to make sure we have that money there because it's always out there. It's always out there. Parks and Recs, the $3,000 that shows up on the first line, that's the sports and shorts that we just approved. Parks and Recs construction, I put 5,000 in. We budgeted $51,000 last year, but none of it happened. We are going to need to do something in those parks, especially Beagle Field. But last year, because of COVID, we couldn't do anything. So at this point, I just put $5,000 in. Equipment repairs, $5,000. We went over last year because we bought the disc golf from Fruitland, but I think 5,000 is a pretty good number. 3,000 for utilities is good. And then 1,000 for miscellaneous, that's in case something breaks that we absolutely have to fix right away. There we go. We've got the money there to do it. The other functions, the FICA, that's based on payroll taxes. That's what the township has to pay for payroll taxes. The health insurance, the 111,661, that reflects the 3.5% increase on the benefits this year. Pension administrative charges, $4,000. That's what John Hancock charges us for managing our pension plan. The bonding insurance, that's standard 25,000. That's what we pay for the insurance for the township. That's for the fire department. The fire department has a part of the benefits, and this is our portion, the township. Workman's comp, I left it at 3,700 because I haven't gotten anything from workers' comp yet on what I owe this year, so I had to leave it high. And then reimbursements for unemployment, again, I haven't heard anything from unemployment, so I left it at 5,000 just to be sure. So our total appropriations are 1,604,439. So the difference between the revenue that I quoted earlier and what we're going to use, we're going to be $267,770 short. And if you look at what we budgeted this year, that's actually better than last year. Okay, let me see where am I at. You have any questions on this part before I move to the fire department?
How do we get short?
Because we're
I
going to
guess.
spend more
Yeah.
money. We're going to spend more money than we have coming in. Plain and simple. Because our budget is, we're only budgeting that we're going to get in $1.3 million and we're going to spend $1.6 million.
That's not good. That's not a good thing. Okay. Going in the red.
Well, we're not going, on paper, we're going in the red for just that section, but in the long run, no, we're not. We're not going to go in the red.
Okay.
We're just
Okay.
going to spend more money. We're actually going to dip into the general fund that is already there to cover that.
Okay.
Because at the end
Thank you.
of the year, the general fund should still have $1,138,944. Even because we're going to take some of that fund balance out to pay for what we're going to use.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Chief, do you want me to do this or do you want to do the fire?
Whatever you want, ma'am.
I don't care.
I can do it. It's just as easy.
Okay.
Good afternoon. As you can see, like Laura, the clerk had explained, the column on the left is what we're budgeting. The middle column is what we've done as of this year. And then again, what we decide to review is your third column. You'll look this year, we did see a slight remainder. It might change a little bit, but I don't think it will. Of $283,045 for our operating. And remember, we have two millages. We have one that's the operating millage, which is can be used for anything but apparatus or large ticket items. It's all of our payroll. The fire equipment is anything that protects the employees and or the fire trucks or the building itself. That's the way it was written in the millage, and it's that has to be spent that way. If we do it any other way, we break the rules. So we don't try to do that. We're anticipating about the same numbers ish that we had last year. If you see, we did get 210,000 in last year. We're anticipating 283,000. That's again an anticipation. It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily happen. For those that don't know, the millage is not paid on the summer taxes. The millage is paid on the winter taxes. So we don't see that until midway through the year. So it always looks like we're a little upside down. It's because we're running off the year before. So it would be a little confusing, but we'll get you through it.
Well, I will tell you right now, because I ran the report today. So right now, the operating number for the fire department is $273,270. So we're pretty close to what we budgeted for the fire operating supplies. So for the budget.
Yeah, we're pretty close. We should be all right.
Yep.
The next line you'll see is says state grants. Last year, we received a grant from the Firefighters Training Council that we paid a portion of it out of that. This year, you'll see a large number. That's a receivable. We're hoping to get that grant. That's the Assistance to Firefighter grant that's put out by the by FEMA and by the United States Fire Administration. It's actually a federal grant. We had it submitted. We're just waiting. I don't have a date when we'll know. Last year they did 37 rounds, giving out $14.8 million across the nation. So it's a lottery. I think we're going to be pretty successful. We didn't go for a real big grant, but I think we'll be successful. So we can anticipate that 48,000 coming in. It's already been allotted to specialized equipment. What we'll do then down further, you'll see where we have to pay a portion of that. And we'll get to that in a second. We keep always at about $2,000 for charges for services, obviously copies, FOIA requests, things of those nature. As most of you know, we protect Cedar Creek based on a contract. Cedar Creek Township does not have a fire department. Every township, you know, is 36 square miles. It has been split amongst 3 fire departments. It's split amongst Holton, Muskegon Charter Township, and ourselves. Holton covers 18 square miles. We cover 10, and Muskegon Charter Township covers 8. It's based on how the roads are, or if you've ever been through Cedar Creek, all the roads don't meet, so we have to go different areas. So we found this is the best way to do it. We used to have a contract that was an escalating scale. Their millage did not go as well as they wanted to a few years back. We as an organization, both the 3 fire chiefs and our respective boards agreed that we would lock the rate for the next 5 years at $46,000. So we get a check from them. We were getting it twice a year. I believe we're still getting it twice a year. We were getting it in December and July. I don't know if that still holds true. The treasurer could answer that. I don't know how they do it. I just know. Is it?
Yeah, it is. We just got the last one, December.
Interest that just fluctuates. We never put anything in there, but sometimes we get the interest depending on how the treasurer puts the money in to see what we get back. And then we don't expect anything else from any sources. That would be like somebody giving a donation or something along those lines. We don't really ever put anything in, but sometimes we do get some money in or get charged back. With that being said, that means our starting budget should be $559,012. Then we move down. So the appropriations are what we anticipate to spend. No change in the membership or dues and meetings. And what that is we are, it falls under the 336 department code, which is the administrator of the organization. That is not to do with anything with my salary. That has to do with the general things that we have to do, paying dues to be part of the Firemen's Association for the state, the Michigan Mavis, things along those natures. And then any conferences that I would attend, we would go. As you obviously see, we only spent about $800 last year in fees for dues, which we still stay under that, but it's pretty close. Run pay in the 708 account, you'll see that stays at 70,000. What we just base that on is how many anticipated calls we are going to run, and then we base it on how many employees show up based on statistical. I do a 4 to 5 year study every year to get that number, and we're still about that 70,000 range. You'll see this year we spent about 44. We still have about another month and a half to go, but we're already 40 some calls up for the year as it sits today. The issue with this, and what's hard for people to understand when we budget, we obviously our run numbers and our incidents are based on calendar year through central dispatch, and our funds are based on our year, which is obviously April. So we have to anticipate a little different when we do that, but it tends to work out all right. We have our duty shifts that stays at an $18,000. That doesn't change. That's a guaranteed number because there's only so many people on at a time, and the dates don't fluctuate. So that stays the same. The next one you'll see is going to be our EMS supplies. Obviously, this year you saw a slight increase in that with COVID, as most things have gone up in price astronomically. We spent a lot more than we have in years past, so I'm going to keep that at $53,000. You'll see the operating supplies have gone up by a couple of $1,000s, and that again is due to COVID. That's for some of the other things that we have to start buying. We have to buy extra equipment. We have to buy some extra things we have to do to decontaminate our apparatus. So that falls under operating. We did hire a few new employees, so our dress uniforms and clothing allowance goes up just slightly for the employees to be able to buy them uniforms when they're on duty. The next one allows us to be fire prevention. Obviously, we didn't spend a whole lot last year due to COVID. We do our annual open house. We usually spend right around that $1,900 mark, and that's for our one-day event that we typically do. But again, we didn't do that last year because of the COVID pandemic. We couldn't have the open house. Next, you're going to see the repair and maintenance to equipment. And what you also see is there's a $5,000 increase. That $5,000 increase is the grant that we're writing is a 95.5%. So they fund 95, we fund 5. So basically, I just put an extra $5,000 in there to cover the grant and the assistance I got from the grant writer. I had a professional writer help me to make sure we covered all the bases that the feds want, because we all know how the feds can be a little tricky if you don't put the right words in the right places. So I opted to use them this year. They're typically pretty successful, so that's why it's a slight increase in that. Under professional services, a question that come up before, what is professional services? Professional services is anything that we do on a yearly basis that does not involve apparatus. So our hose testing, our ladder testing, our maintenance on the generator, that's all in there. I do believe I had asked for 8,800 to increase that just to be safe, but I'm okay if we leave it at 8,000. I'm not sure if we want to change that or not.
Sorry, Alan.
That's all right. I'm okay if we want to keep it that way.
You can
I
change.
put the extra 800 because it was $750 to do the annual.
I missed that.
Because we added the maintenance for the generator yearly, correct?
Oh, that's right.
Correct. That's what that I wanted to add that in as an extra 800. So if we could change that from 8,000 to 8,800.
I will do that.
The next line item you'll see is our central dispatch fees. That's our service fees for dispatch. That includes our phones. It includes, just like you folks, our IT work. It also includes all of our radios. As most of you may have heard, we did do the surcharge as a county a year ago with an implementation date of end of April. They're anticipating that we'll switch over to the 800 megahertz system that will be fully owned by dispatch. They will give us the equipment, but that there'll be some repair fees and service fees, and that's what that 8,000 will remain the same. Same with the radio repair and expenditures. We're gonna have to buy a couple things for our employees, so we want to keep that number at that same thing. You'll see the transportation and fuel is always a guess. We didn't do too bad this year, even though we have an increase in calls. We just like to keep it on that even 10,000 number, obviously, because we're not sure how the gas prices are going to go. They tend to fluctuate every once in a while. In the 910 account or the liability, the clerk had explained that the township has to cover liability bonding and our building insurance. So that covers both. You pay a portion, we pay a portion. We pay slightly more than you do. That's from incidents that have happened in the past that were well before any of our time. So that's why we tend to have a little bit higher insurance rates, but they have significantly come down in the last, in my tenure, they've come down. When I first started, we were about $48,000 a year. We're down to getting close to that 25,000 mark. So I'm pretty happy with that. Utilities will remain the same at about that $15,000 mark. And again, we just don't know what's going to happen with the temperature. Obviously, we want to try to make sure. I'm hoping it'll be a little less with the new furnaces, which, by the way, they are installed and running well. Thank you for that. The next thing you'll see is the repair and maintenance to vehicles. Obviously, our biggest assets in the organization are always manpower and the apparatus itself. We typically keep that about the 30,000 mark. We've been successful last year. We didn't have a lot of big mechanical issues. We did do a few small things, but we're going to get on a good preventive maintenance program. That's why that preventive maintenance went up a little bit in those professional services, was so that we can keep ahead of that, so we don't end up having to work on our fire trucks much more. The next line you'll see in the 931 account, which is training. Training, you'll see a decrease, and that was because last year that grant, that $8,400, we had to take out of an account, and it had to be under a training account. So that's why there was an $8,000 difference. That will come back out and go back down to about our $5,000 rate where it normally sits. Miscellaneous will stay at about that $7,000, $7,500 mark. That can include, and we do usually include our employee physicals in there. I would like to increase that to 8,000 since we hired a couple others. So we'd add an extra 500 to that if we could, Lori.
Yep, got it.
Like to make that 8,000, so there'd be another $500 increase. So we're at a $1,200 increase in changing the budget on our final number, but we'll get to that second. The next thing is, again, chargeback. We always anticipate chargeback, but as you see, we didn't require any last year. So we just keep that at about a $400 and see what happens. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. The next one you'll see is capital outlays for any large expenditure that we want to do. This is where I come to you and ask very graciously that you allow me to put $200,000 to the purchase of the chassis of our heavy rescue. Our heavy rescue is now at its 23rd year, 22nd year. It should be replaced about the 24th year. The way I typically do an apparatus, because apparatus runs between for large apparatus, and I'll keep it short, but large apparatus runs anywhere from about $350,000 to upwards of $750,000. My goal is to keep the heavy rescue in the area of the 400 range. What I've done in the past is I buy out of this year, I buy the chassis, so I get it on this year's pricing. The manufacturer then gets the pre-build. We go to pre-build, start to design the apparatus, which I've already kind of done. And then in the fall, he'll begin to start the apparatus with the anticipation that it'll be delivered right after April of the following year. So at this time next year, I'd come to you and ask for the remaining part of the money, which would be right around that $200,000 mark. And then we can make the adjustments there, but I'm speaking with the manufacturer over the weekend and with the trade-in of our current fire truck, which I don't know what the numbers will be, but I can tell you it's not as much as people think it would be. You would imagine a $300,000 or $400,000 piece of equipment would have a good resale value. They don't because of their age. And it's not the mileage, it's the engine hours is what gets us because those things idle so much. So I'd like to put $200,000 in there to get the chassis. He did assure me that we weren't going to hit that $200,000 mark. It'd be about 195, but I would like to go a little high just in case something happens. If we don't do it before the end of the calendar year, because there'll be a 3.75 increase on the chassis. We're going to go to a little different chassis. That'll save us some money. So I'd like to see that stay in if we could. And then building expenses, we shouldn't have much. You obviously see we went a little over this year. That was due to the fact that we had the failure of the generator, and then obviously the transition to buy the new furnaces, which also failed, which was supposed to be in this year's budget, but obviously got sped up. Next, like Lori had said, you'll see that we have our FICA, which we pay every year, which comes out to a total appropriation of $469,630. Which says at the end with the fund balance or my ending balance would be $578,198, which says that I have $89,000 under budget. So I'm pretty comfortable with. I like to stay in that $50,000 to $75,000, about 10%. I like to stay in that range, 10 to 20%, in case something happens, we can overflow. Other than that, if you have any questions for me, I'll try to answer them as best I can.
With those two changes, Alan, your total appropriations actually are $470,930.
I was just getting a calculator.
Yep. And then so your net of revenues is actually $88,082. So that's what you would put back into your budget at the end of the year.
Correct.
Yep.
If there's no other questions, that's all I have.
All right, I have no questions. Thank you much. Anyone else? All right. Cemetery fund.
Okay,
Do you
so
want to pick up again, Lori?
yeah, I can pick up again. I didn't change the revenue for the cemeteries. I'm anticipating that we will have more burials now that things are opening back up, but I left it at 4,000. Maintenance supplies, I put it 1,000. We didn't do a lot of stuff last year because, of course, of COVID. Utilities, I've got at 1,750. I want to leave those there. Repair and maintenance at 8,000. There are a lot of things that need to get done in the cemeteries this year that didn't last year, like we need trees taken care of and that kind of thing. So I want to leave that 8,000 there. And then I've got $1,000 for education. There's a cemetery conference every year Jess goes to. She couldn't go last year. I anticipate her going again this year. because things are starting to open up. You'll see this year there's $2,900 in education. We actually had to buy BSNA's cemetery program because the program we had died and we could not save it. it was old and we could not update it. So we went with the BSNA program. That's why that number's high. As far as, oh, I just went crazy. I went to the appropriations first. Sorry. I dropped I'm going to go up a little bit. The opening and closing graves, I lowered because I don't anticipate that picking back up real quick. The sale of grave sites will go up. Jess is already starting to get people asking about those. And then the $2,500, we always transfer $2,500 from the general fund to the cemetery fund to make sure that there's always money there for them. Sorry. Ugh, I have my fingers screwed up. So we're looking at a $2,500 or $2,200 deficit next year if we don't sell more, or if we have any other expenses. So we're still in good shape there. The streetlight fund, we actually only have $9,254 coming in from taxes this year for the streetlights. That's got to change. A lot of the streetlights in the past have just fallen from the wayside. We've got to get that. We've got to start getting those tax dollars back in. So I anticipate we're going to have to transfer $21,000 from the general fund into the streetlight fund to pay the bills, because I'm anticipating we're going to have $30,000 in streetlights. I don't know what happened. They didn't renew the streetlight assessments when they ran out, so the general fund has just been picking up the slack, and that's a lot of money for the general fund to pick up. So that's something that we're looking at just to start back up this year. The building fund, where I'm anticipating a little less this year. You can see we're not quite up to the 120,000 we budgeted for. So I budgeted 110,000 next year. And the $1,100, that's what the contractors have to pay to come in and get permits every year. So I'm budgeting 111,000 for the building fund. The $2,000 in operating supplies I left because we have not been properly charging them for the things that we get for the building fund. We're going to start doing that this year. The 70,000 for the building inspector, I left that alone. Same for the electrical and plumbing and mechanical, just because I'm anticipating we're still going to keep doing building. We're still going to keep doing repairs. The utilities and equipment and the use of township employees, those numbers will match. If you look over back on the general fund page of money coming in, these numbers match. So that's money that goes from the from the building fund into the general fund. And then capital outlay, I put $5,000 just in case they need new equipment. I think we're going to have to get them a printer this year, but if his computer dies or anything like that, we want to have a little bit of money there for that. So I'm anticipating that we're going to budget 111,000, anticipating they're going to use 123,000. So they're going to they're going to take $12,000 from their fund, which it has a beginning balance of $206,000 right now. The sewer numbers, I don't have a clue. These are the fees that I've gotten from the past. You see, we've only got 65,000 so far this year, but I still haven't gotten all my fees in. I'm leaving it at 95. The reason why it was that high is because Michigan Adventure came on this year. But unfortunately, COVID hit and Michigan Adventure didn't open, so we didn't get those monies in from Michigan Adventure. I anticipate that'll happen this year coming up. The assessments below are based on the people that we already have on the River Road, Whitehall Road, and the Whitehall Road extension. The $1,000 is just penalties for people paying late on their sewer bills. The interest, I left it at 1,500, probably could have gone a little more, but that's interest on the money that we keep in the bank. And then interest on the Whitehall Road, that's the interest that we get for the bond that we took on that. So I'm anticipating $172,000 at 295 to come into the sewer. And then the depreciation expense, I put it a little high because it changes every year and I don't know what it's going to be next year. I again paid to the Muskegon Township. I just put it the same. Bond and principal payments, it's going to be a little different, but 65 is about right. Interest and fees, I put it at 96 because we paid 95 this year, and then paid to the county operating and maintenance. Because I anticipate we're going to use it more next year, we're going to pay more next year. So we're going to use 341,229. And we're only going to have 172 coming in. So we're going to be $168,000 in the hole. So of the $934,000 that we have in the budget at the beginning of the year, by the end of the year, we're only going to have 765 to 727. Now, it would be nice if we could sell Wayside Trailer Park and get that back on, so that'll help. But unfortunately, this is what's been happening with the sewer fund for years because we've got more money going out than coming in.
Well, and on this, so I had scheduled a meeting today with the head of Department of Public Works for Muskegon Charter Township. Because of the heavy snow last night, he was very busy with all their plowing for their township, and we didn't end up having it, but I did have a phone call with him. And in the past, Dalton has not had a sewer inspection or maintenance schedule. And we definitely want to make that happen. There was a problem a number of years ago. I'm not sure exactly how long, but on the little part that goes down 120 with some of near some of the restaurants, and Muskegon Charter Township actually kind of took the lead on that and did that, but it's technically inside of Dalton, and we won't see problems coming, of course, unless we do some sort of inspection schedule, and we should have a maintenance schedule. And then we have the whole Wayside thing that we own a large amount of property, and paying some of that money for a bond from part that's supposed to go for repair. So if we kept going in the way that we're going, it's definitely one of those things where kind of a classic government thing where we could be surprised that something blows out because we're not inspecting it, and then we go to use our maintenance fund and it's depleted because we're spending it on a bond. So we should be able to get all that switched around, but it is going to be messy.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
I guess it is the sewer.
well,
It
it's
is a
ironic,
sewer.
that's for sure.
That is a sewer, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next section is the water, and basically the water is the same. You see there's no activity because I haven't done any of the journal entries, but basically the water is what it is, unfortunately. You know, I'm budgeting $1,000 for water fees, 17 for special assessments. I put 200 for interest because we do have money in the bank. And then interest from the special assessments at 4,000. So I'm anticipating $23,250 to come into the water fund next year. As far as like Brock, the road maintenances, the dollar amounts are based on assessments that we actually assessed on the taxpayers this year. So that 5,350 is money that's coming in. And then I'm anticipating to spend at least that much on the road maintenance. Now, as you can see, we didn't this year, but you never know. One of the roads might need to be graded more or whatever. So we always anticipate spending what we take in. Same with Johnson Road, that 2692, that's what we have assessed them this year for their road maintenance next year. Then we go to the weed. All the numbers that you see, those are the assessments that were on everybody's tax bill this year. So we assessed $5,001 to Middle Lake weed. There's the $500 that I transfer from the general fund. So we're anticipating getting $5,501 into the Middle Lake fund, and I anticipate spending $5,200. I always go on the high side just in case. We never know if we got more algae or whatever. So at the end of the year, I anticipate $301 going back into that fund. Westlake, we assessed $8,000 on those property owners this year, the $500 from the general fund. I anticipate $9,400 for weed spraying and algae if it shows up, or swimmer's itch, that's another fun one. So at the end of the year, their fund should have $9,731. Northlake their fund's pretty hefty, so we only assess them $2,125. Their $500 from the general fund. Their $7,500 we're anticipating for the weed spraying. So their fund at the end of the year should be about $8,487. Twin Lake Weed, we haven't assessed them in a while, so their fund got really low. So we assessed $8,632 this year, $500 from the general fund. We anticipate $8,000 for the weed spraying. So their fund should be at $1,586 at the end of the year. So the estimated revenues from all the funds is $2,280,26. And what we're going to spend, I anticipate we're going to spend $2,624,72. That's with the changes that Alan asked for in his budget. So by the end of the year, we're going to dip into the funds, everybody's funds, $344,046. So the beginning balance on the funds are showing right now at $3,334,112. By the end of the year, next year, we're anticipating it'll be $2,990,66.
All right. First time through. Who wants to go through again?
No.
Basically, questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns. That is a lot of stuff. It's a minor thing. One thing I didn't think about earlier is in the zoning room, the zoning enforcer's computer, I know has been going bad for a while. It's should be a relatively minor thing. Planning and zoning, I guess it would end up being something like an operating type of thing. Would it be under operating and postage supplies? Or would it be under miscellaneous and education?
Well, if we go into admin, it could come out of the capital budget of admin.
Out of the capital budget admin, right? So, and there's enough in there
Yep.
to cover something like that.
In the computers, I think they ran when we bought the 8. I want to say they were about 500 a piece. So if we talk to Central Dispatch, hopefully we can get it would just be the tower, because his screens are fine, aren't they? It would just be
I believe so, yeah.
desktop. So probably about $500 for a desktop.
All right.
And
Yeah,
for,
and that's just
and for them to install everything for us and make sure it's all up and running and ready to go.
it's just one of those things. I have tons of lists of stuff that I'm working on. There's the management aspect, the political aspect, and
We'll smack you later.
things in maintenance and things in the offices. And it's one of those things I wrote down on a list to look into because he had inquired into it.
Mhm.
And I purposely put it off into the future. So fell through the cracks, but on purpose, so we can get back around to it.
So there's, yeah, that would fall under that 15,000 in the admin capital budget.
Okay, so we're good there.
Yeah.
All right, other things. And so on this, we didn't talk about this before, but the annual meeting for our budget season is kind of an odd meeting overall. Is there any chance that you could just tell us a little bit about that, Lori, like the process?
Basically, at the annual meeting, it's the same thing. We're going to go through the whole budget line by line, but the public is there. And at the, and they're going to comment, and they're going to, they can say, hey, I don't think you should spend this much. And at the end of it, then basically we're going to close that meeting out once we're done. And then we go into a special meeting where we motion and we approve the budget, and everybody that's in attendance actually has the opportunity to say yes or no. So if we bring a budget and there are 20 people there and they say, nope, we don't like it, then we have to start again. I've never seen that happen, but it potentially could. So
Once really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
2011, 12,
yep.
it passed by one vote
Mhm.
of the electors.
Ooh.
So, if I may, Mr. Supervisor, if I may speak
Yes.
freely, please ask questions, because it turned into a show like you wouldn't believe. And we were in that meeting. Last year's meeting was 11 minutes. When we went through it, that went very smooth. We had a good plan. The clerk had everything laid out for all the electors to show up. It was very smooth. We'd had several meetings where the public was there and had asked questions prior to us. I say us, the township, getting to that annual meeting. That in 2011, it was about a 4.5 hour meeting because we had to sit and re-go through every line and cut money. And so I beg of you, and anybody will tell you that probably the two most stressful parts of my job is this and this.
Yes, it is.
I can run
This and
50
this.
car pileups, and that doesn't bother me a bit. The budget just scares the living crud out of me because the 7 of you folks are the ones that yes, approve it. But again, those electorals can come in and if they're not liking what they see, they're sure the heck going to come after and try and finagle some things. And so I don't, I really, if you have questions or concerns, why we're over or under, whatever, please let's do it before we get to that day, because like I said,
Yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, definitely.
I mean, anytime, you can call me anytime with the fire department stuff. I mean, I can help you with the regular general budget. That's, this is what
Yeah,
not-
well, and I mean,
and
and
one-
now this is a
And now, I mean,
public
I-
meeting. Now we don't have any public except for I see one phone number called in. So once we get done discussing, when we do public comment, I'll make sure that I open them up and allow them to speak. There's a technical thing with Zoom stuff is they don't have any version of being able to raise hand or chat. And now because the last meeting where we had multiple comments that almost became a discussion back and forth, obviously we'll cut that in future comments. So it's just one public comment per person per public comment session. And then we had other forms of communication between paper and the chat box. So in this meeting, I've actually turned the chat box off so we can eliminate some of that type of side discussion happening. That's just an unusual thing because of the format that we're in. And then the other thing was that phone numbers that call in, which you can do on Zoom, they don't have a way to indicate that they want to do a public comment. So I know someone's listening to this now. And so I will literally have to ask them to unmute when we get to public comment and ask them verbally, do you want to public comment? And they can tell us yes or no. So we'll make sure we get that done this time. But otherwise there's not public here. Otherwise it would be good to hear from them on this. But I would like your guys' opinion on the deputy supervisor role. I know it's fairly early in. If I was a year into this office, I would know whether we need them to oversee assessing and stuff like this. And obviously we contract out assessing for a decent number. It's a decently high number, a little over $90,000 a year. And it seems like at that point it should be hands off, but as far as I can tell, it won't be fully. So that's quite the thing. And obviously zoning, overseeing ordinances in general, zoning ordinances plus policing ordinances is quite the project. It seems like it might be worth having something there. But what do you guys think? Or anything else?
Well, I want to pretend that I understand everything that we've been talking about and that all these numbers make sense, but it's being our first time through, it's very overwhelming. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way that, because this being on Zoom just doesn't work well for me because I'm trying to look at numbers and trying to figure out things, and I don't want to interrupt anybody because there's a little bit of a time delay. So there's a lot of information in there that I would rather sit down with somebody. So can I come in sometime and just sit down with somebody and go through this? And so I understand a little better. I am concerned. My one concern, of course, is like everyone, is how are we running on a deficit budget consistently? That I know you mentioned something about summer taxes and winter taxes and lapse in time. And you might understand that. I don't. So I'm trying to figure things out on my end.
Nope, that's fine. And I don't have a problem with you coming in and I can go over it with you. That's not a problem.
Awesome.
And I'm obviously on a strong learning curve myself, even though this is technically the supervisor's job is the planning of the budget. Obviously, I'm willing to meet and go over it anytime. You know, just shoot me a message and we can figure out a time. I always have various meetings scheduled, but we can always put one in. And I mean, your questions will probably be good questions that that I need to ask as well.
Awesome.
Are there any areas of concern? Any areas where someone thinks the number is maybe way over, or way under, or obviously they're guesstimates, they're conjecture about the future. So something really unexpected happens, something can be a decent amount off. Just like you know, Chief Styles, I know he always likes to put money back in the fund and that type of thing. And then we had those furnaces and the generator come up, and he was anticipating the furnaces coming up just about on time. Like his plan was pretty close. It was just a few months off. But when unexpected things do happen, they can definitely cause a bump. That's for sure.
Well, and the one thing with budgets, budgets are not set in stone ever, no matter who does a budget. So, you know, like Jeffrey said, we're making an estimate. If something happens, you know, we might be lucky and there'll be more money coming back in, or we could have a major break. And so, you know, you plan for the best and you hope that you don't see the worst. So that's the one thing about a budget. And I try to tell people that it's not, I mean, if I say $500, it may not stay $500. It could be $1,000 for something. So that's what we try to do the best we can do. So.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess just just my brain, the weed spraying for the lakes and stuff. That's just what the people want for all that.
Yes,
correct?
that was,
I mean,
they wanted that. They
All right.
asked us to assess them for the weed spraying so they would get done. And
All right.
we look at that every year, and we only, like with the Twin Lake weeds, we actually probably should have done it a year sooner, only assess on their taxes if their money is running out in the fund.
Okay.
So that's every year we look at that.
I guess I'm fine if that's what they want or whatever. I'm just worried. I always worry about the stuff. What is that going into the water?
I know.
Yep.
Like, I mean, I don't
Well,
I don't live on the lake, so I don't know
Yeah.
why the necessity of it is or whatever. I mean, but I guess if that's what the people want, then that's what they'll get. But I mean, in my mind, I'd rather not have poisons and stuff going in the water, but whatever.
Right. What I understand that they're putting in the water is actually for control of the snails.
Yeah.
It cuts down on the population of the geese. The geese, of course, do their droppings in the water. That's where you get spermization. People get sick and can give E. coli. That's what the premise is of the spraying. That's why they do it. Living on a lake, I learned all that since we moved here.
Makes
Alright.
sense.
Oh, okay.
The street light fund is kind of odd, and I know it's odd, and I knew it was odd coming in. I have not looked into it deeply since being in, been working on and handling a lot of other things. What do you think? What do you think we need to do to get that back on track? Is there, or do we just need to look into it and come up with a
This
plan?
is the thing, I have to look into it because what should have happened as these assessments, because they're all different, because they were added on at different times,
Mhm.
as the assessments ran out, they were supposed to go through the whole process of being reassessed, which means public meetings, letting everybody know that they're going to be assessed for streetlights, and it didn't happen. Now I got to find out if we have to start all over.
Right.
And if you look, I mean, we've lost a significant number of assessments based on what we actually have coming in and what we actually are paying out every year. So we've lost over half our lights, basically, the assessment. So I don't know. And that was one of the things that in the past, we're just going to let it go and the township was going to pay it all. Now, if you want to do that, we could do that. I mean, but that's a lot of money.
What's that $30,000 bill, wasn't it?
It's a $30,000 bill, and I don't have a street light in front of my house. So I gotta say, I don't have a street light in front of my house. So,
Right.
And I don't know that everybody realizes that.
Well, if I may too, those street lights, they're some are still incandescent bulbs, which are astronomically expensive. So, you know, they're going to LED, and they did a stretch. This goes back a few years on White Lake Drive near Keg, which is on the Blue Lake side, but the lights are on the Dalton side. There was a fatal car accident on Mother's Day. Young woman was walking on the side of the road and struck on the Blue Lake side. And there was a big to-do. She had two children where there. It was horrific, but there was a big to-do about the streetlights after that. And that's kind of when the assessment started to kind of dwindle, and we'll just pay it. We'll fix it. There was a lot of, nothing ever happened legally, but it was no one's fault. It was an accident. But I know that the streetlights came up huge then, and a bunch had gotten changed to the LED. But I mean, right over here in front of the firehouse, those are still incandescent, or actually not even incandescent, or mercury vapor, which are, again, very expensive. They're, you know, we don't, it's the one thing we don't, you know, people joke, but there's three things that we really provide to our residents here in Dalton. And that's the transfer station, street lights, and the fire department. That's really all we have to provide, honestly, if you think about it. And we have the parks. Yes, I understand that, but we don't have a parks and rec department, or you know, things like a swimming pool, things like that. But that was a big to do with that street light. Not that I'm telling you what to do, I'm just giving you some back history, but I remember that being a huge thing at the meetings. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, there's stuff with the transfer station. We all know how that nightmare is. It is what it is, but just some back thought for you folks to at least have the history of how that all went down. I don't know why the assessment stopped, but it did. And I don't know.
And I know that, and we don't have any control over when they switch over either.
No.
They're just replacing the incandescent lights with LEDs as they go
But
out.
they will, as long as we're
Exactly. So
funding it, they won't do it.
Yeah, and they are, I mean, if they put in new ones, they're LEDs, but yeah, we're kind of stuck with whenever they decide to make the switch over, they switch over, and we're paying the price. I get two different bills, one with LED lights and one with the incandescent lights every month.
All right. Anything else? Questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns?
Gotta be done.
No? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to public comment. We do have the one phone number that called in. And so what I'm going to do is ask them to unmute themselves. I have done a lot of Zoom calls, but I've never done it through a phone. So I don't know if they need to push a number or what exactly needs to happen. But I have clicked ask to unmute. So if our caller wants to make a public comment, you are welcome to at this time. It's the phone number ended in 7122. That's all I see.
You're still muted.
Still muted.
I've clicked ask to unmute, which is the only option that I have. I'm not sure how it comes across. on a phone line, I assume they have to touch a number of some sort. But that is the only option that it gives me. I can't just fully unmute them. I can just ask them to unmute. And it could be that they don't want to make a comment, which is fair enough. They don't they don't have to tell us that they don't want to make a comment. I'm gonna just click ask to unmute one more time. We'll let it sit for just a minute, because if they do want to make a comment, I want them to be able to. All right, but it looks like it is not it's not coming off mute, and I clicked ask to unmute a few times. So I'm going to assume that they don't want to make a public comment. Is there any other board comment before we adjourn? Hearing nothing, then I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for coming. Obviously, a tedious, detailed, complex subject that we're all on a steep learning curve on, and we're definitely getting assimilated to the situation. So have a good evening, and I will see everyone later.